I don't want to get too in depth. I could talk to you dudes for hours on this stuff. Like, but it's been a long weekend, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time, and including ours, because we got things to do as well. That said, it's funny. So CeCe might jump in on this just with regard to when we came in the other day. You said something to me. We weren't here 5 minutes, and you came over to me and you said something. You remember what it was?
That everybody looked the same.
Everybody looks the same, right? So explain. Can you talk through that?
So I went over to Scott and I said, Scott, how come everybody looks the same? All the guys are like, shoulders elevated and protracted and forward head positions, and a lot of them were bald as well.
Short haircuts.
He's the only one with hair.
The way they walk too, and then the gait that I noticed as well. A lot of people had that right leg externally rotated. So I found that very interesting as far as just body positioning and posture.
Yeah, this is the nature of doing the thing, right? And the repetitive movement and the thing that is the thing. And those things in some way make you good at what you're doing, right? In a lot of ways, when you think about body positioning and even the things that you're talking about pummeling, right? Or, well, we won't get into this. We won't get into that part.
You guys got to come next year.
Yeah. We won't get into all that. But when you're rolling with somebody that's a little bit more muscular, a little bit more thick up top, right? And when he's in side control, right? And he drapes that big ass shoulder across your face versus the bony guy who drapes his shoulder across your face, that feels different. Right. You react different. You respond different. It is a different thing. But the point of that is like she's, again, coaches, human performance people, they're looking at people and how they move all the time. We're nerds. We're freaks like that. It's just what we do. That is our sense of observational awareness all the time because it's what we're doing all day long. And so she's picking out these things and it's very normal for us to do that. But again, it's the nature of the thing. So going back to addressing the strength and again, addressing the injury. And I don't want to make this all about injury prevention, but we absolutely know that the stronger you are,
more resilient.
You already mentioned more robust your joint structure are, your tissues are, all of those, your nervous system, all of those kind of things that help you stay resilient, injury-free. Resilient, meaning like if you stay in this long enough, you're going to get, you're going to sustain some things. And so how quickly can we get you back into the game? Well, the better platform, that you've had built, right? The better platform you have to go back to respond to this stuff. So, we look at that stuff and just with like regard to the barbell training and their strength training. And when they choose to do this strength training, making this a smart program, right? A smart program that not only helps them get stronger, but can address things for them that will increase their longevity, can increase their resiliency beyond just the strength.
Right.
And so I wonder, and it's been a long time since I read that book. I do know it went through very well how to do these exercises properly, not just to build strength, but to keep yourself safe, right? And then build these movement patterns that follow you for everything. They're foundational, fundamental movement patterns. I wonder how you you think about that, not necessarily tell somebody, but think about that in terms of this context.
In terms of keeping longevity, resilience.
Those kind of things, and helping people keep with. Let's just talk about joint mechanics, right? Yeah. I mean, in what we're looking at, what you mentioned, like with shoulders as an example, those elevated, protracted shoulders, right, which starts to limit or reduce, let's just say, I don't know, I hate this word, but optimal shoulder mechanics. What they're doing is optimal maybe for what they're doing, but that doesn't necessarily transfer over into the game of life long term.
Absolutely.
With all the things we have to
I
do.
understand what you mean.
Yep.
If there's something you're going to do that is going to it's going to alter the sort of bias that your body is going to get into because of either bad movement patterns or just the things that you're doing a lot, right? So like, a grappler, I mean, you can tell when somebody's a wrestler, you can tell when somebody's a grappler, not only because of their ears, right? But because of how they move and how they walk. You can tell when somebody's a striker. Like a lot of times you can tell because of how their shoulders and how they carry their hands and stuff like that. But just take a second and think about how much time you're spending as a grappler in this kind of curled up position on the ground, exerting a lot of strength and energy on the front of your body, right? Just either curled up, holding somebody, framing, doing all these things. So yeah, it makes sense that your body kind of defaults to this kind of curled up position. Not, in my opinion, whatever. It's not the end of the world. Yes, there's going to be a potential for things to go wrong. But if you layer that on top of just the amount of training that you're doing, right now, you've got this picture where it's like, yeah, your posture's fucked up. Also, you're like, you're getting tighter, and also you're training a bunch, right? So what are we going to do in order to fix that? The truth is that like just movement in and of itself is not going to be enough,
right?
Because think about how much time and how much force you're experiencing in these positions. So if there's anything that we can do that's going to help that, anything that you do like acutely, like right now before training, where you're going to stretch, you're going to move around, you're going to do some whatever mobility stuff or whatever you want to call it, that's a transient effect, right? You're only optimizing what you already have, in other words, right? So in other words, I'm not going to do the splits. Like right now, I could bend over and like spread my legs and get so far, and then 10 minutes later I can get significantly deeper, but I'm not going to do the splits, right? Because I've never done them before. I've never pushed it. And that's the point. You're not going to get any more than you already have out of something that's not loaded, in other words, right? So in order to actually fundamentally change your posture, the way your muscles operate, the way your joints operate, it's got to be heavy enough to counteract all of that stuff you're doing. You have to have a stimulus, right? You got to have a stimulus, and there's nothing more efficient at doing that than heavy deadlifting, heavy squatting, heavy overhead pressing. And I heard this multiple times this weekend. And I had this conversation with guys because, the shoulders thing, they're like, man, I always thought that pressing overhead, because this is what they say, is what everybody says. As soon as you have a shoulder injury, like, don't do anything heavy over your head.
Yesterday. We just went through that yesterday.
You need to do things heavy over your head. There's a very limited band of situations that you cannot press over your head. Almost everybody else can, right? I'm much quicker to dump the bench press than the overhead press. And that's kind of the opposite of the conventional, even medical wisdom, which is ridiculous, right? So yeah, you need to press overhead heavy. You need a deadlift heavy. You need a squat heavy, because that's what's going to, at least, if you're in that situation, it's going to be the most effective at undoing any kind of those movement or postural issues that you may be concerned about. Right?
Yeah, I love that answer, because what we really do, again, going back to the basic foundational movements that you're talking about, like if you had to pick 5, right, or you're 4 plus 1 or 2, if you're doing some auxiliaries or whatever, however you want to look at it, you want to pick, and because of time, efficiency, and we know effectiveness of loading those types of things, whether it's a 5x5 or however the program is designed. You want to pick the thing that's going to do that. There's 2 caveats there. One is if applied appropriately, right? So again, it's how are you doing the movement? So the movement's important, the movement being, let's call it the deadlift, right? How you're doing it is important, right? It doesn't have to be perfect, but it is important that we're trying to do that well. And there's a way to get there. And you may not be in a position to do that really, as good as the next guy right now, but we're going to get you there over time. The other thing, the other caveat there would be, not caveat, but thing to address is heavy. Heavy's relative, right? How do we know that? And there are ways to figure that out for you. Like what is that? And also managing the heavy, right? So how heavy is too heavy, right? And how heavy is enough, and how heavy isn't heavy enough. So there's things to learn there and kind of gauge. And if we're applying the movement properly, right, and we're following some general principles that are not overcomplicated, right, to put that extra 5 pounds on the bar a week or whatever, and do it properly, it is not that difficult. People overcomplicate this shit all the time. It drives me up the wall. It doesn't need to be. We talk to a lot of people and see a lot of people in the gym every day that need a lot of things. And so are very limited because they have zero capacity. Right. They have effing no strength, right? They don't even know their right from their left, half the time. So like they look like a walking nightmare again. They're getting through life and you're just looking at them going, oh my God,
how have you gotten this far?
How did this happen? Right? Like this looks like it took work, to get here. So there are things that can be applied, but if we had to break it down into its simplest component, it really is not that complicated.